On June 21, 1941, over 2.7 million Soviet soldiers stood guard along the western border. They outnumbered their German adversaries in tanks and aircraft. 3 weeks later, 417,729 of them would be dead or captured in a single encirclement. Their entire armies erased from existence. This is the story of how the pre-war Red Army didn't lose a battle. It simply ceased to exist. On the night of June 21, 1941, a Soviet soldier stationed in the Western Special Military District goes to sleep in his barracks near the Polish border. He's been told repeatedly through propaganda broadcasts that Germany is an ally under the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. His unit is part of a force that seems invincible on paper. 2.7 million Soviet troops, over 12,000 tanks, and 9,000 aircraft positioned across the border districts. His commanders tell him the Germans facing them are actually outnumbered. He expects tomorrow to be just another day of peacetime routine. What he doesn't know is that his entire world rests on an illusion engineered by Stalin himself. Those impressive numbers, over 12,000 tanks, 9,000 aircraft, mask a catastrophic reality. Only about 1,000 of those 12,782 tanks are modern T-34s or KV-1s. These are the tanks with sloped armor that German shells bounce off. These are the machines that should terrify the Wehrmacht. But there are only 1,000 of them scattered across 2,000 kilometers of frontier. The rest, obsolescent T-26s and BT-7s, designs from the 1930s with thin armor and outdated guns. Even worse, only 60 to 70% of these tanks actually run. The others sit broken in motor pools, waiting for parts that will never come. Therefore, when the invasion begins, most Soviet tanks will never fire a shot. His mechanized corps has fuel for only 1 to 2 days of operations. Not weeks, not even a week. 1 to 2 days. After that, the tanks become steel coffins. The ammunition and fuel depots that should sustain his unit in combat, they're located just 20 to 40 kilometers from the frontier. That's a 30-minute drive for German panzers. These depots were positioned there for offensive operations, Stalin's plan to eventually attack westward. But now they're perfect targets for a rapid German advance. Therefore, when the panzers come, Soviet units will run out of bullets and gasoline within 48 to 72 hours. His commanders, General Dmitry Pavlov in the Western District, General Mikhail Kirponos commanding the Kiev District, General Fyodor Kuznetsov in the Baltic, all share the same impossible burden. They have explicit standing orders from Stalin. Do not mobilize. Do not take defensive positions. Maintain peacetime routine. Any action that might provoke Germany is forbidden. Pavlov has received intelligence warnings. Multiple sources report German concentrations on the border. Spy networks send detailed reports. Deserters cross the lines with specific invasion dates. But Stalin has made his position clear. These warnings are provocations themselves, designed to trick the Soviet Union into breaking the pact. Therefore, Pavlov cannot order his troops to dig trenches. He cannot disperse his aircraft. He cannot move his ammunition depots away from the border. He can only wait and watch the trap close around forces he commands but cannot save. The communication infrastructure connecting this soldier to his commanders is a fatal vulnerability waiting to be exploited. Insecure telephone lines strung forward to frontline units with inadequate radio equipment concentrated only at headquarters. The Red Army runs on telephone calls, not radio nets. When those lines are cut, entire armies will go silent. So our soldier sleeps on the night of June 21st. He's reassured by the strength of numbers he's been told to trust. He doesn't know that the organizational structure meant to command those numbers has already been paralyzed by orders from Moscow. He doesn't know that Stalin's purges in 1937–38 executed or imprisoned the experienced officers who might have defied those orders. He doesn't know that his commanders are inexperienced men promoted beyond their competence, filling the shoes of the dead. He doesn't know that in a few hours the world will catch fire. The Soviet soldier wakes not to reveil, but to the earth shaking. German artillery erupts across the entire frontier. He runs to his command post for orders. But the telephone lines are dead, cut by the first barrage, and by Luftwaffe strikes hitting communication hubs. His officers have no contact with headquarters. Runners are dispatched. Many never return. No one knows what's happening beyond their immediate position. The war has begun, but the Red Army has already lost its nervous system. General Dmitry Pavlov, commanding the Western Special Military District, literally cannot contact his own armies within hours of the invasion. He picks up the phone. Silence. He sends messengers. They disappear into the chaos. The rigid hierarchy that once connected Moscow to the frontline foxhole has simply vanished. Pavlov attempts to organize counterattacks. He orders his mechanized corps forward. But each corps launches piecemeal, uncoordinated, fighting its own isolated battle with no knowledge of the others. Therefore, the Soviet counterattacks are destroyed in detail, one corps at a time, each defeated before the next can arrive. And then comes the air assault. Over 1,200 Soviet aircraft are destroyed on the ground in the first day. Most parked in neat rows in the open, undefended. They never get airborne. Why? Because Stalin's orders forbade alert status. Dispersing the aircraft might provoke Germany. Putting them in revetments might signal distrust of the pact. Therefore, the Luftwaffe achieves air supremacy by lunchtime on June 22nd. Soviet pilots arrive at their airfields to find burning wreckage. Some planes explode as they're being fueled. Others are strafed before their engines even start. A few manage to take off, but they're outnumbered 10-1. By nightfall, the Soviet Air Force in the western districts effectively no longer exists. Within 48 hours, the ammunition and fuel depots positioned just 20 to 40 kilometers from the frontier are overrun or destroyed. Soviet mechanized corps, equipped with fuel for only 1 to 2 days of operations, run dry before they can engage the enemy. Tankers abandon perfectly functional T-34s and KV-1s. Not from combat damage, not from mechanical failure. Because the fuel tanks are empty, and there's no resupply coming. The Germans capture intact Soviet equipment by the hundreds. Tanks with full ammunition loads. Artillery pieces never fired. Warehouses stacked with supplies. All left behind by units that dissolve trying to retreat on foot. The scale of destruction becomes industrial. Average Soviet losses reach 15,000 to 20,000 troops per day in the first 3 weeks. During the major encirclements, that number spikes to 40,000 to 50,000 per day. This isn't combat. It's systematic obliteration of organizational capacity. Entire divisions cease to exist. Not because they were defeated in battle, because they ceased to exist as coherent units capable of receiving orders, coordinating movement, or resupplying their positions. A division commander tries to order a retreat. But he has no working radios, and the telephone lines are cut. He sends motorcycle couriers. They're strafed by Stukas. He tries to move his division east. But the roads are clogged with refugees, broken units, and abandoned vehicles. His soldiers have no ammunition. His tanks have no fuel. His artillery has no shells. Therefore, his division simply fragments into thousands of individual soldiers trying to walk home. As communications died and fuel ran out, Soviet units faced a new horror. Watching German panzer columns stream past their positions, racing deep into the rear, closing the trap behind them. The Soviet soldier hears the distinctive rumble of tank engines. He prepares to fight. But the German panzers don't attack his position. They drive past it, heading east. Within 48 hours, he realizes the terrible truth. He's not on the front line anymore. He's behind it. The trap is closing. This is the operational brilliance and human horror of the German pincer movement. Army Group Center has fielded 50 divisions, including 9 panzer divisions. They're not fighting for every Soviet position. They're racing around them. The panzers stream past frontline units. They drive deep into the rear at speeds that outpace any Soviet response. Their objective isn't to engage. It's to encircle. German Panzer General Heinz Guderian watches his tanks advance 80 kilometers in 2 days. His crews report something astonishing. Soviet units aren't retreating in order. They're not forming defensive lines. They're just there, sitting in their positions, waiting for orders that never come. Occasionally, his tanks encounter T-34s and KV-1s. German shells bounce off the sloped armor. The Soviet tanks are nearly invulnerable to German guns. But these modern tanks are too few. Perhaps 1,000 among the 12,782 Soviet tanks in the border districts. And they're poorly coordinated. They operate alone or in small groups. No infantry support. No fuel for sustained operations. No larger operational plan. Therefore, even when German crews face superior Soviet tanks, they win through coordination, radio communication, and combined arms doctrine that turns individual engagements into systematic encirclement. By early July, the Białystok-Minsk pocket closes. Inside, 417,729 Soviet soldiers. That's the equivalent of losing over 40 divisions in 2 weeks. By July 9th, 290,000 are captured. Over 4,800 tanks destroyed or abandoned. Over 9,000 artillery pieces lost. The Soviet soldier realizes his position is now a pocket within a larger pocket. German infantry closes in from the west. Panzer spearheads block the roads east. The Luftwaffe owns the sky. Soviet units don't retreat in order because there is no order. They cease to exist as organized fighting forces. Entire armies are cut off from supply and command. They fragment into isolated pockets. Some try to fight their way east. Most fail. The roads are clogged with broken formations, abandoned equipment, refugees fleeing the advance. There's no fuel for the tanks that remain operational. No ammunition for sustained firefights. No communication with higher command to coordinate any coherent response. The trap has closed. And inside the trap, a new nightmare begins. The Soviet soldier sits in a forest clearing, surrounded. His ammunition is nearly gone. He can hear the Stukas circling overhead. Their sirens scream before each attack. His unit has no food, no contact with command, no hope of resupply. He has 2 choices. Attempt to break through German lines in the dark, or wait for capture, and almost certain death in a POW camp. This is life inside the Kessel, the Cauldron, where hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers face a trifecta of horrors that turns military defeat into human abattoir. The first horror, the Luftwaffe. Stuka dive bombers attack in relays. They circle the shrinking pockets like vultures. Their sirens are designed for psychological warfare, a screaming howl that announces death from above. German artillery pounds the trapped formations. There's no Soviet air cover because 1,200 aircraft were destroyed on the ground on June 22nd. There's no anti-aircraft ammunition because the depots were overrun in the first 72 hours. Therefore, the men inside the pockets can only dig shallow trenches and wait for the bombs to stop falling. The second horror, starvation. Soviet units entered the battle with perhaps 3 to 5 days of food. Now it's been a week. 2 weeks. The supply columns were destroyed or captured. The field kitchens were abandoned during the retreat. Soldiers eat grass. They eat bark. They kill horses and eat them raw because fires attract Stuka attacks. A lieutenant writes in his diary, "We haven't eaten in 4 days. The men are too weak to attempt a breakout. We just sit here and wait." The third horror, the choice. Some soldiers attempt breakouts in small groups. They move at night through German lines. They navigate by stars. They avoid roads. Most fail. German machine guns cut them down in the dark. Or they make it through the first line only to encounter the second. Or the third. Those who surrender face a different death sentence. German POW camps, where more than half of Soviet prisoners will die from starvation, exposure, and deliberate neglect. The Soviet Union never signed the Geneva Convention. Therefore, German guards treat Soviet POWs not as soldiers, but as subhuman enemies to be worked to death or left to starve. It's not a choice between survival options. It's a choice between how you die. The pattern repeats across the entire front with industrial efficiency. The Smolensk battles through July and August add another 300,000 to 350,000 Soviet casualties. At least 180,000 captured in various encirclements. In late July, the Uman pocket closes, trapping around 103,000 more soldiers. These aren't tactical defeats with orderly withdrawals and regrouping. These are human abattoirs where entire armies cease to exist as organized fighting forces. Where the men who went to sleep on June 21st believing they were part of an invincible military wake up in hell with no way out. In Moscow, the search for scapegoats begins. General Dmitry Pavlov, who attempted to organize defense and counterattacks despite losing contact with his armies within hours of the invasion, is recalled in early July. He's court-martialed on charges of cowardice and criminal negligence. In late July 1941, just over 1 month after the invasion, Pavlov is executed by firing squad. The disaster Stalin's own orders created now has an official culprit. Even as the catastrophe continues to unfold. Even as hundreds of thousands more Soviet soldiers die in the cauldrons. Stalin blamed the commanders he had paralyzed. Kirponos would die in a breakout attempt in September. Kuznetsov relieved of command. The system that created the catastrophe survived by consuming its victims. The Soviet soldier from June 21st, if he survived, would be unrecognizable by August. His unit is gone. His commanders are dead or captured. The army he served in no longer exists. He is now part of a desperate improvisation, a new Red Army being forged in real time from whoever can hold a rifle. By mid-July 1941, just 3 weeks into the invasion, the Soviet Union had lost the equivalent of its entire pre-war standing army in the western districts. Over 2 million casualties. 417,729 men captured in the Białystok-Minsk pocket alone. Another 103,000 encircled at Uman. The Smolensk battles would add 300,000 to 350,000 more. These weren't just numbers on a casualty report. They represented the complete annihilation of organizational structures. Experienced cadres built over 2 decades. Equipment stockpiles representing years of industrial production. All gone, not through prolonged attrition, through rapid encirclement and organizational disintegration. The peacetime Red Army simply ceased to exist. The scale of this loss forced measures that bordered on the apocalyptic. Mass mobilization of untrained conscripts, men who'd never held a rifle thrust into the line within days. Workers pulled from factory floors. Farmers pulled from fields. Given a uniform. Given a rifle if they're lucky. Told to stop the Germans or die trying. The evacuation of entire industries eastward. Factories dismantled and loaded onto trains as German panzers approached. Machinery moved to the Urals. Workers' families evacuated. Entire cities of production relocated 1,000 kilometers east. Defensive battles fought not by professional soldiers, but by whoever could be scraped together. Workers' militias, officer cadets, penal battalions. Convicts given rifles and told their sentences would be commuted if they survived. The Soviet Union was rebuilding its army while simultaneously fighting for survival, forging new divisions from raw recruits even as the old ones died in the cauldrons. This catastrophe had an architect. Stalin's pre-war policies created the conditions for the fastest military collapse in modern history. The purges that eliminated experienced officers, men who might have defied his orders not to mobilize. The forward deployment doctrine that placed entire armies within reach of encirclement, optimized for offense, not defense. The refusal to mobilize that left units frozen at peacetime strength, forbidden to dig trenches or disperse aircraft. And when the inevitable disaster struck, Stalin blamed the commanders he had paralyzed. The system that created the catastrophe survived by consuming its victims. The opening of Barbarossa wasn't the beginning of the Soviet war effort. It was the violent end of the Soviet peacetime military and the birth of something entirely new. Forged in catastrophe. Forged in industrial-scale human sacrifice. The pre-war Red Army died in the cauldrons of 1941. From its ashes would rise the force that would eventually reach Berlin. But that transformation would cost millions more lives. It would redefine the scale of human suffering in modern warfare. By mid-July 1941, over 2.7 million Soviet soldiers had gone from peacetime routine to total annihilation in just 3 weeks. The organizational structures, experienced cadres, and equipment stockpiles built over 2 decades were gone. Not through heroic last stands, through systematic encirclement and organizational disintegration. 417,729 men in one pocket. 103,000 in another. 180,000 more at Smolensk. Each number representing not just casualties, but the complete erasure of military units that had existed for years. The fastest military collapse in modern history began not with a battle, but with a telephone line being cut. It ended with the pre-war Red Army ceasing to exist, and millions more deaths to come. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more World War II historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.